everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Music Weekly, the show where I give you guys the top prog headlines for the week and introduce you guys to some new prog singles and give you updates on the channel and what's happening here on Nathan on Shuffle. It's always a fun time. I've had a fun time throughout this whole year. Today's December 16th, 2023, and I kind of wanted to use this opportunity to do a bit of a year-end wrap-up of the year, what I consider to be some of the biggest prog headlines throughout the whole year. I thought that would be a fun way to wrap things up and put a bow on the shows for this year. There's not going to be a New Music Weekly show for the next couple of weeks because of the holidays, and usually news kind of slows down around this time anyways, so I think that's the right call, but I'll be back up and running in January with a lot of cool new stuff to talk about. So today I'm going to talk about the top 5 prog headlines for the whole year, but first I want to give some quick hits of things that happened this week that I didn't want to let fly by. So you're going to get basically a supersized episode, hopefully not too long. I'm going to try to get through these items pretty quickly, but you get like your standard New Music Weekly and then a bonus content on top of that of like my rundown of the best prog headlines for the whole year. So for this week in particular, the big new release from my view was the 20 Committee and their album The Cycle Undone. This came out on December 12th, just earlier this week. So the 20 Committee are a band from New Jersey. The main leader of the band, I believe, his name is Jeffrey Langley, who does a lot of the lead vocals, keyboards, and synthesizer work on the album. It has a little bit of a jazz fusion tinge, but also a bit of that Neil Morse style symphonic prog from the modern era. And I think it's just a fantastic record. They even have Annie Haslam of Renaissance doing some lead vocals on the album's title track, so you get a little bit of a classic prog flavor into this as well. It's a little bit spacey, a little bit sci-fi in its themes, but I just think it's really well done and has some incredible melodies and just was a real highlight for me for this week and a wonderful record. So definitely check that one out. I know some of these late year releases sometimes get lost in the shuffle as people make their year-end lists and focus more on albums that came out throughout the rest of the year, but this is definitely one worth checking out if you like the style prog I like. And so a couple other quick hits here that I wanted to mention. Big Train announced shows in the US for March 2024. These will be their first shows in America, so it's pretty exciting. This is hot off the heels of their announcement of their upcoming album, The Likes of Us, coming out March 1st, so it'll be in celebration and touring that record. The dates, there's only 4 dates so far, plus their Cruise to the Edge performance as well. Those dates are in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Rutherford, New Jersey twice, and Arlington, Massachusetts. So basically the Boston area there. So exciting, I know it's not everywhere in the US, it's only a select area, but it's really exciting to see a band like Big Train coming over to our neck of the woods over here in the US, so should be some cool shows to check out for them. There's a new band signed to Inside Out called Whom Gods Destroy, a little bit of a super group of sorts with Derek Sherinian and Bumblefoot included. We've also got vocalist Dino Julicic, the rhythm section of bassist Yas Nomura, and drummer Bruno Valverde. So they've signed a deal with InsideOutMusic. Their album should be coming out in March next year. Basically, it feels like this is a little bit of a continuation from Sons of Apollo that featured both Derek Sherinian and Bumblefoot as well. But with Mike Portnoy rejoining Dream Theater, it seems like Sons of Apollo is basically defunct now. And it seems like those musicians are transferring into this project. So it should have maybe a similar flair to Sons of Apollo, some more darker, heavy progressive metal is what I'm assuming with this release. So something to look out for in the new year for sure. And then finally, I saw a cool new Christmas song that Steven Wilson put out called December Skies, which apparently was co-written with AI technology. I think he input prompts into ChatGPT and basically had it spit out the lyrics to him, because he's always been approached to write a Christmas song, but he hasn't felt very inspired to write Christmas lyrics. It's just not really his thing and not what he tends to write about. So he thought, well, I'll make this a challenge and have AI do the lyrics and I'll write the music for it. So really interesting, weird kind of juxtaposition, brings about a lot of interesting thoughts and feelings about the use of AI in music, and how do people feel about that. People might have mixed feelings about that. It seems like Steven Wilson himself may even have mixed feelings, even though he used it in this case. So really interesting, really cool little track, I thought, and good to put on like a Christmas playlist, because to me, there's not very many great prog Christmas songs to find out there. They're out there. There's some cool gems if you look hard enough, but this is another one to add to that list of Christmas music by prog artists. So it seems like Randy McStein helped on the guitar and background vocals. So really cool little project and interesting to check out. So I'll put the YouTube video to that in the links in the description. So now we get into what I wanted to talk about mainly here, is the recap for the year and what I thought were some of the biggest headlines to be talked about this year, at least on this channel. And please let me know in the comments, like, any other big news items from the year that you thought of, that you considered some of the biggest news. I'd be interested to see your guys' lists of top headlines for the year as well. Some honorable mentions of stuff that I thought was really cool throughout the year. The new Yes album, Mirror to the Sky, coming out, and that lead single, Cut from the Stars, and them doing their Classic Tales of Yes tour. So always cool to see activity from Yes, and it's always a big feature on this channel, so I wanted to mention them as an honorable mention. Also in the same family, Trevor Rabin signing with Inside Out and releasing Rio, I thought was a pretty big thing to happen in the world of prog this year. It ended up being a really strong album that showcased a little bit of his proggy chops and his penchant for doing different things musically and doing different genres and styles. So I thought that was cool. The Porcupine Tree live album that was released this year that documented their great Closure continuation tour that happened last year, I thought was a really cool item. Big Train signing with InsideOutMusic and announcing their upcoming album in March, I thought was a big deal for the prog community. Seeing them continue forward even without the presence of David Lungden was a promising thing for one of my favorite bands. And then lately, the reunion of Beardfish, maybe a little bit low-key in the news items, but it's been really exciting seeing them on Facebook reconvene in the studio and be working on new material and having a couple live dates out there. I'm really excited to see what 2024 brings for Beardfish. But now into the top 5 proper of what I thought were the biggest headlines for the year in prog. Number 5, some notable passings in the prog world. Some people who passed away who I thought were pretty notable figures, and I'm sure there's many others. These are just 2 that really stood out to me throughout the year, of people that I felt close to and felt, I'm huge fans of their bands that they were a part of. Ray Shulman of Gentle Giant passed away at age 73 earlier this year. I talked about it back in April of the year. It was such a sad thing to hear about, because he's the first member, I believe, of Gentle Giant to pass, one of the iconic Shulman brothers who were such a big part of the group, and his playing in that group was just superb. He's one of the greatest musicians of the original prog scene, so that was really, really sad to hear about. And then more recently, original Dream Theater singer Charlie Dominici passed away at age 72, and I talked about that just in November, just a few weeks back. So that was unfortunate. He was a big part of that debut record that they came out with, When Dream and Day Unite, and of course went on to do his own cool stuff within the prog metal genre, solo and in his own projects. So really a great musician and great presence, and another sad loss in the prog world. So those were 2 of the most notable passings that I covered on the channel, at least. Item number 4, I wanted to talk about Moon Safari releasing their album Himlabacken Volume 2 after their 10-year hiatus. This was big news for us Moon Safari fans, maybe a little bit more of an obscure prog band in the grand scheme of things. They're not on the level of like a Yes and a Genesis and stuff, but for people who follow modern progressive rock like me, they're a big name in their own right. And to bring back those sumptuous vocal harmonies and just the wonderful symphonic prog backing that they put into their music with great melodies, catchy hooks. It's just everything I love about prog, and their release of their new album was something highly anticipated, at least in my sphere, with my fellow prog YouTubers that have been talking about this as well. They had a single come out, Between the Devil and Me, They had Rich Mauser mix the album, which I thought was a pretty cool thing. And the album released in December just recently, and it's had gotten a lot of buzz. I think it's been fairly positively received in the community. So to have them come back after a 10-year hiatus, I thought was pretty big news in the modern prog world, at least. Item number 3, Roger Waters. Roger Waters news throughout the year. Him feuding with David Gilmour, involving himself in different political discourses, and of course, topping it all off with re-recording Dark Side of the Moon, which was received with pretty mixed results, I would say. So I talked about him back in February, about his spat with David Gilmour. There always seemed to be a lot of fighting between these guys, pretty much putting any chance of any reunion for Pink Floyd just totally dead, because these guys just can't seem to get along. Roger Waters tends to be a figure of controversy and had some really interesting things to say about Dark Side of the Moon, and taking a lot of credit for it himself and maybe minimizing the contributions of the other band members. I don't know too much about his political angle, but I know there was some controversy there. I don't like to get too far into politics in here. But the re-recording of Dark Side of the Moon I thought was pretty notable. Not my thing. I wasn't into it at all. I know some people have enjoyed it, but a lot of people just it doesn't connect with. It's taking a classic and putting a twist on it. It's a little bit darker. He does these like spoken word passages that just aren't really interesting, at least for me, to listen to over and over. But he released it on October 6th, and it was a very notable release for the year, so I thought this deserved to be on the list at number 3. Item number 2, I wanted to mention Peter Gabriel releasing his album I.O. You know, it was released as singles throughout the year. Basically, on every full moon, he released a single throughout the year, every month. So you got to hear the album piece by piece if you wanted to do it that way. Of course, many people waited to hear the full album when it came out this December. And he did a massive tour that was very successful, and he performed a lot of these songs from I.O. on the tour. They were super well received, and it seems to me from my looking around the interwebs and looking at different YouTubers that this has been a very successful album. I believe it hit number 1 in the UK on the album charts, so that's really exciting. And so seeing this notable legendary prog musician coming out on top and being able to dominate the charts and having this exciting release that people are buzzing and talking about has been a great factor in the prog world this year. It's been just an incredible delight to see Peter Gabriel rise after his big hiatus from his last studio record, and to see him come to such prominence with a great tour, a great album, and just really being one of the prime figures of the genre for this year. Of course, his album leans probably more in an art rock style direction, but if it's good music, it's good music, right? So, and he definitely has his roots in that prog world with Genesis, so I think it's worthy to put on a prog headline list. And item number 1, to me, this was the biggest news, and maybe I'm skewed more towards newer prog and things of that nature, but Dream Theater announcing the return of Mike Portnoy was the number 1 news item for me this year. Just something I would have never imagined to happen. This was talked about on my channel on October 27th. Mike Portnoy left the group quite a while back, I believe, like 2000, I want to say 2008, 2009, something like that, off the top of my head. And so it's been quite a lengthy time apart from these guys, and it seemed like it ended kind of on some bad terms. There was not a lot of communication between the guys. It just didn't seem like it went very well, this breakup, and it just was a tough situation. That was a big headline piece of news back when it happened, and it was almost even more surprising back then to hear that he had left the group and had gone off to do his other various projects. But hearing that he's back in the fold is super exciting, and I can't wait to hear what he'll come up with the band in 2024. It sounds like they're going to be going into the studio and doing new material not too long from now, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a new Dream Theater album come out in 2024, and I'm sure it will be hotly anticipated by everyone who loves Mike Portnoy and his contributions. And The unfortunate side of this coin, of course, is Mike Mangini, who's been drumming with Dream Theater in Mike Portnoy's absence, done an incredible job. He's an incredible person, just a real bright light, and just has taken this so well and has been very gracious in basically handing the drum chair back over to Mike Portnoy. So it's gone well, this transition, I think, and I think most people are excited to see what could happen with this lineup reforming and coming together, seeing Mike Portnoy and his contributions back into Dream Theater. It does bring some questions about what's going to happen with some of Mike Portnoy's other projects, but overall, it's a positive, and I'm excited to see what Dream Theater does next. So to me, those were the big headlines for the year, just as a quick recap and rundown. As for the channel this week, I did a review this week of Peter Gabriel's I.O. A lot of fun to talk about that one in depth, and I really love the album. I think it's a notable, beautiful album that everyone should check out. And then I did a cool show about 25 album recommendations from the second half of the year. I think it would be well worth checking out if you want some new prog recommendations and to see what's out there in the prog world. It was a lot of fun to put that together, and I think there's a lot of gems out there for new albums. Basically, I'm doing a couple more shows talking about the end of the year. I'm going to be doing my top 50 through 17 as my part 1 of my favorite albums of the year. And then I'm going to do another video doing my top 16 tournament where I pit my top 16 albums of the year against each other to see what comes out on top as my favorite album of 2023. Excited to get those shows out there. I have a show with Jana coming out also of our final episode of Classic Albums 101 featuring Radiohead's OK Computer. So that was a lot of fun to talk about, and so you'll be able to see that shortly coming up on the channel. And a lot of fun stuff ahead in 2024. I just plan to keep things churning. I have a big, cool idea for 2024 that I'm going to be talking about probably in January to tease it. Should be a lot of fun for you classic prog fans. I think there's going to be some fun shows ahead. So thank you guys for joining me. It's been a great year. I've had fun talking about the news, and I plan to continue to do so into the new year. And hopefully you guys will follow along with me. So thank you for your support, and I'll hopefully catch you in a future episode. Bye, everybody.